3 sinister true tales from the haunted countryside, unexplained horrors finally revealed. The wind howled through the fields like a banshee, sending chills racing down Natalie's spine as she pulled into the gravel drive of the Williams' secluded farm. Raw terror wrapped around her heart as she remembered the whispers surrounding their small town in rural Ohio. The Watcher, they called it, a presence lurking in the woods, tracking families with haunting intensity. Her fatigue from another endless shift as a nurse clashed with a gnawing dread, igniting a surge of panic. Mark, her husband, had just been laid off from the factory, weighing heavy on his shoulders. Lily, their curious teenage daughter, was fixated on local legends, filling Tommy's innocent mind with tales of shadowy figures and dark woods. Shadows dappled among their cornfields seemed jumpy, menacing even as the autumn sun faded. "What if the stories are true, Mom?" Lily had asked just that morning, eyes alight. Panic clenched Natalie's stomach. Tales were just that, she told herself. Yet as night settled in, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The shadows that danced in the corners seemed sentient, twisting as she scanned the darkened edges of their porch. There were noises, hushed whispers that skittered across the floorboards, knocks on the walls that sent Tommy darting into Lily's arms. Her exhaustion clouded her reason, but something felt cold and wrong, creeping through her veins. Her pulse quickened. Lights flickered as they sat around the dinner table. Mark stood, muttering about the generator, the flickering flames their only source of warmth. A jab of fear pricked at Natalie's mind, silencing Tommy's restless chatter. "What's wrong, Mommy?" he asked, clutching his sister's hand tight. It was too quiet, too still, only the crackle of the fire breaking the oppressive silence. Before she could comfort them, a sudden crash echoed from the porch. Heart racing, she exchanged glances with Mark. The door, it swung open by itself. "I'll check," he whispered, tension etched on his face. He stepped out, leaving them in the choking darkness. There was only silence and her own heartbeat, thudding like a warning drum. Time stretched as fear wrapped around her throat. The shadows grew bolder, shifting and swirling just beyond the reach of flickering candlelight, deepening the dread. Then came the disembodied voice, low and droning, calling her name. Natalie, dark and slippery, it slid into her ears like an oily tendril. Panic seized her, and she struggled to breathe. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The door crashed against the wall, and Mark stumbled back in, eyes wide and white as a sheet. "It's him," he stammered. The storm door just swung open by itself. Panic bounced around the room, knitting fear into their very bodies. Then, piercing the gloom, a flickering light illuminated the field, the unmistakable glint of a lantern. And there he stood, Mr. Thompson, too familiar with those haunted woods, that feral smile cutting across his face. "You should listen to the warnings," it proclaimed softly. As their blood ran cold, the realization crashed over them. Trust had crumbled, and terror waited just outside their door, whispering secrets they were never meant to hear. The night was not done with them yet. What physical horror awaited them in the obscured shadows? Mark stumbled back, sweat glistening on his forehead as he shut the door behind him, the old wood slamming with hollow finality. Lily clutched Tommy to her side, her eyes wide, reflecting only fear and confusion. Natalie's heart raced as she darted to Mark's side, the glow of the flickering lantern outside casting grotesque shadows across the room. "What does he want?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know. But we need to stay together," Mark replied, his voice rough, laced with panic. Through the window, the light pulsed, painting the walls in shades of eerie gold and sickly green. Natalie felt as if the shadows themselves were reaching toward her, eager to pull her into their suffocating embrace. Maybe it's just Mr. Thompson, she tried to assure them, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He's just checking on us. Outside, the lantern flickered again, drawing closer. Shadows danced at the corners of her vision, twisting and writhing. With each beat of her heart, memories of the folklore whispered in her ear. The watcher. Just stories, she reminded herself, desperate to keep her thoughts from spiraling into madness. Mark moved toward the window, muscles strained, every instinct urging him to protect his family. "We can't let him in," he murmured, as if trying to convince himself. "He's sick, there's something wrong with him." Suddenly, the glow from the lantern extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound was the frantic beating of hearts. Natalie reached for Lily and Tommy, their small hands trembling in her grip. "What's happening?" Lily pleaded, voice quavering. "I don't know," Natalie whispered back, staring into the blackness. "We need our flashlights." "I'll get them." She inched toward the hallway, each footfall echoing like a drum in her ears, amplifying her fear. Before she reached the door, the front porch creaked. A low, whispering chant seeped through the cracks, chilling her blood. "Come outside, come play." It was a voice, smooth and silky, but filled with malice. It seeped into her mind, urging her to comply. She turned back to Mark, who was still at the window, the glow of his cell phone illuminating his taut features. "What is he saying?" Mark asked, eyes wide, expression shifting from concern to horror. I think he wants us to go out there," Natalie stammered, voice barely above a whisper. She felt trapped, torn between the urge to flee the impending doom and the instinct to stay inside, safety threatened by the very shadows that lurked outside. But then, there was a loud bang on the door, rattling their frames. The walls almost shook under the pressure, and Tommy let out a yelp. "Mommy, don't let him in. Please." His innocence pierced through the growing dread, fueling a protective fire within her. "Stay back," Mark shouted, stepping in front of the children. Another bang echoed, followed by that familiar chant, closer now, sharper. "Come outside, come play." Before Natalie could speak, the door splintered as Mr. Thompson slammed his shoulder against it again, laughter spilling from his lips, so sickeningly sweet. "You're just hiding. Come and join me." The air grew thick as the acrid stench of decay slipped in through the opening, choking them. Foul whispers clawed at their minds, unraveling threads of sanity. Summoning the last vestiges of her strength, Natalie grabbed the flashlight from the hallway. "Stay behind me," she shouted, resolving to face whatever lay beyond. As she stepped toward the looming darkness, her breath caught in her throat at the thought of the watcher, the tales merging into the reality threatening to envelop them. Then there was silence, a brief moment that felt like an eternity. But as her hand reached for the doorknob, she felt something cold and clammy caress her wrist. "No, don't open it," a voice, barely audible, warned her from the depths of the shadows. And then she knew the watcher wasn't just a story. The real horror was already here, within. What had they unknowingly invited into their home? The doorknob turned under her hand, the air thickening with unspoken terror. Natalie's heart pounded like a war drum, each thump resonating in her ears. She let go of the cold metal, scrambling back, panic tightening her throat. "Mommy, what's happening?" Tommy's small voice broke through the veil of fear, grounding her in the present yet pulling her deeper into uncertainty. "Stay close," she ordered, eyes darting between the door and Mark, who appeared frozen, a shadow of himself, muscles taut as wires. Just then, the front porch creaked again, the laughter of Mr. Thompson echoing through the house, mutilated and foreign. "You can't hide forever. The fun is just beginning." Every hair on Natalie's body stood on end. The whispers had grown louder, weaving in and out of her thoughts, filling her mind with images of twisted faces and dark, unforgiving eyes. She grasped the flashlight tighter, the beam flickering under her grip. "Run to the basement. Mark finally shouted, breaking his trance. Now! Without waiting for them to respond, he grabbed Natalie's wrist, pulling her toward the hallway. We need to get out of here. Lily and Tommy stumbled behind them, breathless and wide-eyed. The dark enveloped them like a living thing, pulsing with a life of its own. She led them, heart racing, shining the light ahead, revealing the dreadfully familiar paint-chipped walls, strangled with memories. Go! Mark urged, shoving them forward as he glanced back at the door, fear painted across his features. They reached the basement door, the air growing colder with every creak of the wooden steps as they descended. The thick scent of earth and mold filled their lungs. The flashlight flickered, swinging erratically, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms. Here, Mark whispered, trying to keep calm, yet even his voice quivered. Let us find a place to hide. Natalie cast a glance around the dimly lit room, her heart sinking. Shadows clung to corners, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to watch her. She swept the beam across the cluttered space, searching for a spot. Then she spotted the old, dust-encrusted shelves laden with forgotten items. There! She said, pulling them toward a narrow space behind the shelves. A corner-like alcove where they could huddle together. Once cramped inside, the fear weighed heavy in the air like an impending storm. Through the floorboards, the thud of footsteps echoed above them. Each heavy step sent tremors through the earth, shaking the very walls they leaned against. Why won't he leave us alone? Lily whispered, her voice barely a quiver. Natalie squeezed her daughter tight, feeling her warmth and innocence against the cold dread. We just need to stay quiet, she replied, only half convinced. Outside, the door creaked again, this time more insistent. Mark crouched low, teeth clenched. Whatever happens, don't make a sound, he warned. Their breaths synchronized in the frail silence. The footsteps grew louder, a taunting rhythm that matched the frantic beat of Natalie's heart. Something was closing in, although they couldn't make sense of what. Then suddenly, the basement door burst open, revealing a silhouette. Long limbs stretched into the room, arms grasping, fingers curling like claws. Was it Mr. Thompson? Or something more sinister? Come out wherever you are. The voice slithered down the stairs, full of malice and dark promise. Natalie's heart dropped. They were trapped. They had stepped into the very nightmare they tried to escape. She clutched Tommy as he whimpered, feeling the enormity of their situation bear down on them like lead. As the figure descended further into the basement, the lantern swayed overhead, casting flickering shadows of its distorted form upon their faces. Her breathing turned shallow, lungs tightening like cords. And that's when she noticed it wasn't just the lantern light that flickered. From the depths of the shadowed alcove, something else was stirring, awakening something that had been conjured by their very fear, and it was hungry. Mommy! Tommy cried, his voice shrill and desperate, shattering the silence. The creature froze, inhaling deeply, as if savoring the essence of their alarm. What had they now truly awakened? The shadows began to swirl around them, pulling tighter, and an unsettling realization washed over Natalie. They weren't just hiding from Mr. Thompson. They were about to face the wrath of a darkness they couldn't comprehend. In that moment, she knew it would take every ounce of courage she had left to protect her family. The terror was coming, and it wouldn't stop until it found them. What had they truly invited in, and would it spare them? As the creature hovered in the darkness, a pulse of dread shot through Natalie. Each ragged breath she took seemed to draw the shadows closer. It wasn't just a monster waiting, it was something far more sinister, something that had been hiding, festered, and now, hungered for release. Shoo! Mark hissed, his voice barely a whisper. Yet even in her desperate attempt for quiet, Natalie could hear his heart racing. It matched the staccato thuds of footsteps overhead. Mr. Thompson prowling, seeking, taunting. Mommy, I'm scared. Tommy's small voice quivered beside her, and she felt the tiny hands grip her tightly, nails digging into her skin. She shook her head, forcing her panic down, but that didn't stamp out the rising sense of doom. A chilling chuckle echoed from the shadows. "What's wrong, sweetie? Can't you see I've come for a little party?" It was a twisted mirror of Mr. Thompson's jovial tone, now marred with sinister delight. Then, cracking sounds filled the air as the basement door creaked further a bare inch, each noise tugging at Natalie's limits. She didn't understand, how had it drawn them into this hell? The flickering lantern dimmed again, and for a moment, she thought she could see the outlines of grotesque forms edging closer, merging with the very shadows clinging to the walls. Were they beyond her vision? Were they the lost souls, or merely extensions of whatever that thing was? "Mommy." Tommy whimpered again, this time more fervently. She could feel the tremors of his body against hers. Then, with a sudden surge, the creature lunged forward, the body morphing and flowing through the narrow space they hid in. Its form began to stretch, stretching impossibly long, shrinking and widening a grotesque shape meant to terrorize. "Run! Get out!" Mark shouted suddenly, breaking the silence, as he shoved them back against the shelves. But there was no escape, nowhere to run. It was pure chaos. Mark's shadow darted out, colliding against the grotesque figure like child's play amidst the horror that enveloped them. Natalie's heart raced. She could see it now, a face, or what looked like one, formed from shadows, deep-set eyes glinting with malevolence. The very essence of despair leaked from its being, darkening the air around them. The alcove was crammed, suffocating. "What do you want?" she screamed, feeling the pressure build inside her chest. But it was too late to prevent the suffocating dread. This was the nightmare, and they were the unwilling participants. "What I want?" The creature's voice echoed in her head, wrapping around her like a serpent. "I want to play forever." The light flickered again, the room dimming as if the lantern itself feared the presence. Natalie's mind reeled. How much longer could they hide? A sense of suffocation overcame her, pressing harder. In a panic, she shoved her way past the children, out of their cramped space. She needed to find a way out, to break free of this hell. But as she turned, the basement door slammed shut, echoing the finality of their choices. "Mommy!" Lily cried, but the sound was swallowed by a chorus of whispers that resonated within the very walls. The words coiled around her thoughts, taunting, intoxicating her with fear. "Together we can be one." Natalie felt the walls pulse around her, beating like a heart, feeding off their terror. They were no longer just hiding. They were caught in a trap as old as time, entwined with the spirits that lingered, hungry for more. Desperation surged through her. She turned back. "We have to fight," she urged, but the fear in Tommy's eyes crushed her resolve. Before she could devise a plan, the alcove rattled with a mighty force, a scream erupting from the darkness. The shadows congealed, drawing closer, tightening their grasp, and the whispers morphed into a roaring din. Give in," they chanted. In that moment, the ground beneath them shifted, splintering the reality they once knew. A crack of light appeared, just above the shadows. An escape? Or a more terrible fate? "Go! Now!" Mark shouted, pulling Tommy forward, but Natalie felt rooted to the spot. What lay beyond? Was it salvation or damnation? Before she could take a step, the shadows lunged toward them, a myriad of eyes glimmering in the darkness, and with excruciating clarity, they noticed, it wasn't just eyes watching, it was a myriad of unearthly faces long forgotten, twisted in agony, each caught in limbo. What had they really summoned? A figure stepped into the silhouette, drawing closer, eyes fixed on Natalie, each step echoing her worst fears, a smile carved deep into the murky visage. And then, another voice erupted, an echo of the past. "You've come to play." Natalie's heart sank as the truth hit her like a freezing wave. A flicker of hope, or might they face an even deeper horror? Trusting her instincts, she tore her gaze away, preparing to fight, to cling to her family through the dark chaos. But the question lingered: had they truly come to play, or were they already doomed to be trapped forever in this waking nightmare? The air thickened with a suffocating dread, each breath heavier than the last. The shadows writhed like living creatures, hungry tendrils reaching out as if to ensnare their prey. Natalie felt Tommy's small body shake against her, and she gripped his hand tighter, trying to reassure him even as her own heart raced uncontrollably. "Mark. What do we do?" She gasped, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of murmurs surrounding them. Mark, wild-eyed and breathing heavily, backed against the wall. He pointed at the flickering lantern. "We need that light. It's our only chance." As Mark lunged for the lantern, shadows surged forward, a wall of darkness almost solid in its intent to consume. Natalie felt a chill surge through her. Were these shadows just born from the creature, or were they the remnants of others who had failed to escape? "Stay close," she shouted. But Tommy's terrified whimpering made her heart splinter. "Lily, hold his hand." With Tommy clinging to her, they turned to face the mass of writhing darkness. Mark wrestled with the lantern, struggling to keep its flame alive against the invisible gusts that threatened to snuff it out. "Keep it steady," Natalie urged. Mark glared at the swirling forms, his jaw set with determination. "I can do this." A low growl erupted from the shadows, reverberating off the walls. "Playtime is fun until it isn't." The voice slithered through the air, wrapping around Natalie once more, squeezing her mind. In a moment of clarity, Natalie recalled the stories she had heard growing up about things that lurked in the dark, things that wanted to play all right, but their games had deadly stakes. If they were to survive this, they needed to confront whatever twisted game was afoot. On the count of 3. We pushed towards the stairs. She shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. 1, 2, 3. They surged forward, plunging through the blackness. Natalie could feel the coldness trying to latch onto her, an icy grip desperate to drag her back. She pressed forward, clutching Tommy's hand as tightly as she could. Mark shouted behind her, the lantern flickering in his grasp, sending fearful shadows flying across the walls. Suddenly, the shadows twisted violently, colliding against their bodies like a rough tide, knocking them off balance. They stumbled, and Tommy let out a terrified scream, tangling himself back in fear. "Tommy! No!" With sheer willpower, Natalie jerked back, yanking him out of the darkness, but shadows were already curling around him, squeezing. She felt them tugging at her own limbs, threatening to pull her apart. "Get the light." Mark let out a scream of frustration as he struggled against the pull of the creature's cunning tendrils. "Keep going. I'll get him." But the shadows seemed to respond to Mark's defiance. They began to lurch towards him, monstrous appendages emerging from the depths, reaching for him like skeletal hands. Just then, an unearthly howl erupted, a sound that shattered Natalie's resolve. "You can't fight it. You're already mine." It was Mr. Thompson's voice, but distorted, echoing with venomous laughter that resonated from every corner of the basement. "Mark!" she cried, desperation escalating into panic. He was now struggling against a mass of darkness, wresting with the lantern as the light flickered furiously, but it was as if the shadows were laughing, winning against their feeble attempt to escape. Light! They needed light. Summoning every ounce of strength, Natalie broke free from the grasping darkness and lunged toward the lantern. She had to get it to Mark, had to stabilize the source of their only hope against this terror. But as she reached for it, a painful jolt shot through her arm. The shadows had found her too. She fought. With every ounce of her being, she stripped herself free, pulled the lantern closer, feeling its warmth brush against her skin as she turned back to face the horror looming around her. "Light!" she screamed. "Show me light." In that instant, a brilliant flash erupted from the lantern, pushing against the shadows, illuminating the grotesque faces surrounding them. Their contorted, tormented features screamed back in horror, as the darkness flickered and crackled like a fading echo. But Natalie knew this wouldn't last. they had only bought a few moments. She felt the abyssal dread creeping back, clawing at her soul. Just as the shadows retreated, Mark surged forward, grabbing Tommy and Lily. "This way," he urged. But as they made for the stairs, another shape materialized, looming larger than before, a figure of despair that sent chills racing down their spines. "Leaving so soon?" it hissed. Natalie froze, heart pounding in her ears. She had thought they were close to freedom, but here it was, the true form of the nightmare. And just as she steeled herself to face it, the light flickered, hesitating, dimming. She felt the familiar cold claws of fear wrapping around her once more. "What now?" Tommy whispered, voice trembling. Natalie's stomach nodded. They could try to fight, or they could flee into the arms of something far worse. That choice hung in the air, palpable, the looming dread infectious, spiraling into the depths of darkness that beckoned them closer. Would they enter the light of hope or plunge deeper into the abyss? As they stood poised at the edge of choice, the creature's voice coiled through the air, taunting them, "You've come to play forever." Would they survive the night? Or had they sealed their own fate by awakening the horror? The tension wrapped around them like a shroud, smothering every ounce of hope. Natalie could feel her heart thudding in her chest, drowning out the sinister whispers that echoed through the basement. The creature's eyes were like pools of darkness, but within them, something flickered in anticipation, a gleeful hunger. "Run!" Mark shouted, breaking the spell. He grabbed Tommy and Lily, dragging them towards the staircase, desperation spilling from every word. But Natalie hesitated, the glow of the lantern dying just when they needed it most. "Mark! The light! We can't leave it!" As if reacting to her words, the creature lunged forward. It was a giant, grotesque amalgamation of shadows, its form shifting and writhing, mocking the light as if it were nothing more than a candle against a storm. "No!" Mark yelled, and they stumbled back, fingers fumbling against the walls. Something cracked in the air. The lantern flickered violently, a flicker of dim hope as they rounded the corner. But would it be enough? Natalie's eyes darted to the concrete stairwell leading out. It seemed impossibly far yet eerily inviting. The warped shadows crawled down the walls, reaching, clawing, as they surged closer. She could almost taste the metal tang of panic. "Leave it!" Mark screamed. "Just run." The others didn't need convincing. They bolted, but Natalie's instincts screamed to save the lantern, to fight back with its warmth. A surge of courage flooded her, fueled by desperation. "Hold on!" she yelled, pivoting back toward the lantern, fueled by a primal fight-or-flight instinct. The shadows lunged. Just when she thought she could feel their icy grip on her legs, the lantern flickered back to life, bathing the room in an intense glow. Visceral screams erupted from the depths, hideous faces contorted in agony and rage, slipping back from the light like insects from a flame. "Grab it!" Tommy cried, reaching out as he struggled against Lily's grip, the shadows continuing their relentless approach. "Come on, Natalie!" Mark pulled on her sleeve, urgency bubbling over in his voice. With a final desperate swipe, she snatched the lantern, its warmth pulsating through her fingers, a lifeline amidst chaos. But the moment she turned, the creature loomed nearer, a vile entity that seemed to feed off their fear. They scrambled up the stairs, but shadows writhed like serpents, choking the space around them. "Quick! Up!" Mark shouted, their feet pounding against the cold, hard steps. Just as they reached the doorway, a powerful force slammed against their backs. The creature's murmur pierced through the air, "You think you can escape? I will always be waiting, always hungry." With a final push, they flung themselves through the threshold, slamming the door shut behind them. They leaned against it, hands shaking, breaths coming in ragged gasps, the lantern still glowing fiercely beside them. But the relief was short-lived. The momentary darkness melted away, revealing an empty hallway that had been locked away. Whispers skittered along the walls, wrapping around them like chains. "Where are we?" Lily stammered, scanning the unfamiliar corridor, eyes wide with fear. Shadows slithered in the corners of the flickering lights, dark shapes creeping in, as if their close escape had only awakened more horrors. "This doesn't feel right," Natalie murmured, dread pooling in her stomach. A sound echoed from behind them, a soft thud, then silence as the door creaked ever so slightly. They exchanged panic-stricken glances. Was it the creature? Had it followed them? "Don't open it. We have to find another way," Mark urged, urgency etched across his face. But as they turned to flee, the air shifted, a familiar voice laced with betrayal floated through the uneasy silence. "Why did you leave?" Natalie's breath hitched as she recognized that voice. It was Mr. Thompson, only now tinged with something darker. It snaked through her thoughts, waking something deep inside her. Memories of laughter mixed with dread flooded her mind as the shadows intensified, eager for their next move. What secrets lay in this haunted corridor? And would they be able to outrun the embodiment of their fears, or would they succumb to the shadows that now seemed to close in with each breath? Natalie felt the urge to scream, but a single thought pierced through everything else. They may have escaped one nightmare, but a far worse one awaited them. Could they trust their own memories? Or did the darkness already have them? As they crept forward, shadows seemed to grow longer, twisting toward them, urging them to turn back. But would facing the truth set them free or seal their fate forever? The whispers twisted around them, a cacophony of familiar voices, mingling with the fear pulsing in Natalie's veins. "Why did you leave?" It echoed, and the shadows seemed to pulse with the question, tightening their grip on her heart. The fear that had drained her courage only moments before now roared back to life. "Keep moving." Mark's voice was sharp, slicing through the fog of memories. They had no time for the past, not with whatever hunted them in the dark. He shoved Lily forward, and she stumbled, nearly landing on her knees. "Here." Tommy pointed toward a door at the far end of the corridor, the single beam of their lantern revealing a rusted handle. "We have to get out of here." The shadows pressed in like wet blankets, suffocating. Each step toward the door felt heavy, each breath a reminder of their close escape beneath the basement. With every inch, the whispers grew more insistent, swirling like a storm. "Why did you leave? You abandoned me." Natalie's mind raced, wrestling with the remnants of memory. Mr. Thompson had been so kind, always a comforting presence in their small town. But the warmth of those memories turned cold as she recalled the darkness in his eyes the last time she had seen him. Wasn't he at him they had run from? "Don't listen to them," she shouted, shaking her head as if that could banish the voices. But the shadows danced and flickered. "Tommy, Lily, we need to keep moving." The door loomed closer, warped wood splintering under the weight of darkness. Mark grasped the handle, and the lantern's light flickered again, revealing a faded symbol carved into the wood and eye surrounded by swirling patterns. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, pulling back as if burned. "It's just a door," Tommy urged, though his shaking hands belied his words. "Open it." In a panic, Mark twisted the handle and pulled. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a pitch-black room beyond, its depths swallowing the lantern's light. Shadows swarmed, eager to escape into the new space. "What's in there?" Lily squeaked, her voice trembling. "There's only one way to find out," Mark urged, stepping inside. The others exchanged uncertain glances but followed, ignoring the instinct to flee. The air inside was thick and stale, almost suffocating. The flickering lantern now illuminated old furniture shrouded in dust and decay. A broken mirror hung crookedly on the far wall, reflecting their anxious faces back at them, contorted with fear. But there was something beyond their reflections, something that shifted behind them in the darkness, and it was watching. "Is that?" Natalie pointed at the mirror, the surface pulsing as the shadows coiled around it, forming a face. It was Mr. Thompson, his features contorted with rage and sorrow. "Why did you leave?" he demanded again, but this time the words were more than a whisper, they reverberated through the room, shaking the walls. "Run!" Mark yelled, driving them back toward the door, but the shadows roared louder now, a clamor that seemed to drown out everything else. The door slammed shut as they collided against it, trapping them in the dark with that vengeful figure. "What do you want?" Natalie shouted, her voice cracking. "Your secrets," the apparition hissed, a cruel smile spreading across its face. "You abandoned everything." The ground shifted beneath them, roiling with an unseen force that sent them tumbling backward. The mirror cracked, splitting the image of Mr. Thompson into an array of twisted forms, each more grotesque than the last. Panic surged through the room, throbbing like a heartbeat. "We need to break the mirror," Tommy yelled, but as they scrambled to their feet, the shadows lunged toward them, hungry for chaos. With the lantern flickering perilously, Natalie felt a surge of courage. "Follow me," she cried, channeling every ounce of bravery she could muster. She dashed toward the shattered remains of the mirror, knowing the answer lay within the darkness, deep among the fractured pieces reflecting their fears. What would it reveal? And could they confront what they had tried so desperately to escape? As they reached for the fragments, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. Would they discover the truth, or would the dark haunt them forever? Glass crunched underfoot as they lunged toward the shards. Panic surged, spurring them on. Natalie's heart raced, each beat echoing like a drum, drowning out the rising cacophony of whispers. She knelt, grasping a jagged piece of mirror, its edge sharp against her trembling fingers. In the flickering light, she could see desperate reflections, horror mirrored in their eyes. Suddenly, the air grew colder. Breath turned to mist as a wave of dread washed over them, the shadows thickening. "What do we do?" Lily cried, her voice quaking, eyes darting toward the figure still trapped in the darkness. Mr. Thompson's visage twisted, the kind smile replaced with a gaping maw that seemed to stretch beyond reason. "We break it, or we die," Tommy shouted, his voice firmer now, worn confidence spilling through fear. He picked up his own shard and surged toward the mirror's center, where the figure flickered ominously. "I want to let him take us," Mark declared, rallying his fear into something actionable as he broke a piece loose, shards flying across the room in a glittering arc. The air pulsed, the whispers shifting into 1,000 voices, drowning every thought. "We need to hurry." In that instant, the shadowy figure lunged forward, its mouth opening to unleash a howl that felt like ice shredding through the room. A gale of darkness poured from him, slamming into the walls, rattling the very foundation of their refuge. Another piece of the mirror shattered, sending a shockwave through the air. The room flickered between dimensions, reality and nightmare entwined in a terrible dance. Natalie felt the pull of darkness, its icy fingers grasping at her ankles, trying to reclaim what it had lost. "If we don't act now, it'll consume us," she screamed, her resolve solidifying like steel within her. One movement. One strike. She hurled the shard of glass at the mirror's heart. Time froze, and for a moment, silence enveloped them. The mirror exploded, shards of every size spiraling outward as light filled the room. Shadows shrieked, recoiling as if struck, clinging to corners, desperate to retreat into the void. But the light revealed something else, images trapped within, ghosts of memories, moments long ignored, swirling in that incandescent brilliance. "No, no." Mr. Thompson's echoing voice turned frantic, strangled. The wailing grew louder, drowning out their thoughts, and Natalie felt the shadows surround them, pressing tightly, seeking retribution. "What are those?" Lily gasped, pointing as faces emerged from the chaos, lost souls, pleading for release, whispering the same words over and over again. "You left us. You abandoned us." They were not just whispers now, they were physical manifestations of guilt and fear that clawed at their souls. The shadows twisted and turned, victoriously reclaiming bits of the shattered mirror. With each piece that reassembled, the room darkened further. The figures in the light seemed to flicker and fade, fading into despair as the intensity escalated. "Do you see?" Mr. Thompson's sneer returned, mocking their retreat. You can never escape your choices. In that moment, Natalie knew they had to face it. Fight it. She shouted, but her own courage began to wane, shackled by the weight of their past. Tommy, shaking off the dust of fear, took a step forward, lunging toward the approaching darkness with a piece of the broken mirror in hand. Get back! He yelled, determined. But it was a gamble. The shadows, enraged, leaped at them, and in that instant she realized this would either be their salvation or their doom. As the darkness converged, a sudden flash of light ignited in the room, propelling them backward, but Natalie felt something latch onto her leg, dragging her down toward the shadows. The twisted faces of the lost reached out, clawing, desperate, trapping her in a web of memories that suffocated her. Help! Would they break free together, or would their dark past consume them one by one? As her fingers slipped from the light, she gasped, feeling the cold grip of despair take hold. What lies waiting in the darkness? Who would survive the night and who would the shadows claim next? As Natalie was pulled deeper into the shadows, the light flickered, creating a dim threshold where hope battled despair. The cold, clammy grip tightened around her ankle, yanking her back, dragging her down into the abyss, a murky void filled with desperate whispers. You left us, they moaned, voices merging into a cacophony of sorrow, each plea sharper than the last. Tommy. Lily. Mark. She screamed, the sound lost in the swirling shadows. Panic carved a deep groove in her heart as she clawed at the darkness, fighting against the icy hands grasping at her, but the void felt endless. Each breath filled her lungs with despair. Nat. Hold on. A voice erupted from the chaos. Mark's face broke through the shroud, taut with fear but resolute. He lunged forward, grasping for her. Get back! Tommy shouted, darting toward Mark, half-turned as if drawn to the shadows too. It's too dangerous. I want to leave her. Mark growled, desperation thrumming through his veins. He reached for Natalie, fingers grazing her wrist just as the shadows pulsed violently, scraping their presence against him, seeking to ensnare them both. In that instant, she felt a spark of connection, a thread taut between them. Pull me up! She cried, knowing it was their only chance. The shadows writhed, snapping like hungry wolves, forcing her deeper. Now! He shouted. With a primal roar, Mark tugged at her, utilizing both strength and willpower. Just a heartbeat later, light erupted again, fueled by their shared desperation. It was blinding, washing over them like a wave. In that luminous soul-light, the shadows recoiled, hissing, and the haunted faces melted like wax in the sun. Keep fighting. Lily's voice rang clear, filled with newfound strength. She wielded her own piece of glass as if it were a sword, drawing from the determination swelling within. Don't let them win. With that rallying call, something shifted. The shadows shuddered and faltered, revealing cracks in their darkness. Fueled by adrenaline, Tommy and Mark worked in tandem, swinging their mirrors like lifelines, launching beams of light into the dark corners. But as the fragmented reflections shattered the void, a looming figure lurked beyond the reach of the light, a silhouette far thicker and more grotesque than before. With rivulets of darkness streaming from it, Mr. Thompson advanced, his grin more sinister than she remembered. You think you can banish me? I am their keeper, their guardian against your betrayal. He gestured, and shadows flared behind him, zipping forward. No! Natalie shouted, breaking free from the grip just long enough to scramble toward the others. She felt the weight of every lost soul pressing against her, fighting to break free and begging for vindication. In that moment, amidst the roiling darkness and flickering light, a memory surged forward. Together! She screamed amid the chaos. We break this! They rallied, their determination intensifying. All four thrust their shards into the air as if conjuring their own flames. The shards pulsed, glowing brighter with every heartbeat, forming a barrier against the onslaught. But just as they took a steadfast stance, the shadows surged. And behind them, the door swung open. An escape? Or a trap? A gust of wind doused the light. "Look out!" Mark shouted, but it was too late. The shadows crashed into them, and all at once, darkness swallowed the light whole. Natalie felt herself careening into darkness, falling. Where would she land? What if the others followed her? Would this plunge lead to the abyss or a way to confront their deepest fears? The last whisper she caught before the void consumed her was a haunting. "You abandoned us." What awaited beneath the surface of the void? A darker truth or a chance for redemption? Would they rise from the abyss, or would they succumb to the echoes of their past? Light flickered back into existence, pulsing like a heartbeat, but this time it looked different. The familiar warmth swelled around them, binding them, illuminating outlines both familiar and horrifying. The shadows writhed in agitation, their frantic whispers morphing into cries of denied hunger. Natalie blinked, disoriented, finding herself hovering just above the ground. The faces of her family surrounded her, worry etching lines into their foreheads, but the light held them close, creating a barrier against the encroaching darkness. "Where are we?" Lily's voice was small but fierce, eyes darting around, wide with a mix of trepidation and courage. This new realm felt vast and empty, illuminated by beams stretching infinitely, a stark contrast to the shadows that sought to envelop them. "I don't know," Mark gasped, his expression both awe-filled and terrified. "But we have to keep going. Stay together." Suddenly, the air turned heavy again as the maze of shadows coiled tighter. "Together," Tommy echoed, the word hanging between them, echoing deeply. "No more running." Murmured cries erupted from the dark corners. Here, the shadows took on more substantial forms, twisting with each step they took, whispering hauntingly, "You cannot outrun your choices. You left us. I won't abandon anyone," Natalie finally said, lifting her chin with a determination ignited from within. "We face it. Together." They began to walk, the pulsating glow of the lantern illuminating their path, cutting through the suffocating darkness. With every step, they summoned their courage. Memories of laughter, love, and belonging pierced the gloom and fueled their resolve. The shadows recoiled, hissing violently as if offended by their rightful claim to strength. "Keep moving," Mark shouted, wedging himself between Natalie and the surging darkness, his unwavering presence a pillar of strength. "I won't let you take them," he yelled at the shadows as he swung the remnants of the lantern, sending beams spiraling toward the darkness, temporarily dispersing it like the sun splitting through clouds. "Mom, what is happening?" Lily's voice trembled, but it was laced with newfound hope. Taking a deep breath, Natalie spun to face them, her heart racing with both fear and love. "We're reclaiming our light. We need to confront what we've lost and what we left behind." Just ahead, a swirling mass of darkness rotated, coalescing into the figure of Mr. Thompson. His features twisted, a grotesque reflection of their memories, his once comforting demeanor shifted into something unrecognizable, a keeper of their darkest fears. "You cannot escape your past," he yelled, mouth stretching into a grin that sent shivers down her spine. "Watch us." Tommy stepped forward, emboldened by their unity, his courage a spark reigniting the fading light. "Let us show him what we are made of," Lily added fiercely. Natalie felt each whimsical shadow closing in at their sides. "We run on courage and the love we share," she rallied, gripping her lantern tightly. At her command, they surged forward, 4 hearts beating as one against the relentless tide. With each step, they flung shards of truth and memories into the shadows, images of joy, warmth, the love that had once existed with the man they thought they knew. "Stay behind us," Mark shouted, blocking a creeping tendril that reached for them. Light erupted, filling every inch of the space, and at last, they reached Mr. Thompson. "No more," they chanted, each voice louder than the last, filling the realm with an undeniable force. The darkness howled, shrieking as their memories overpowered it, rendering it powerless. Shattered pieces of the mirror cut through the darkness like knives, and in a frenzy, the light exploded around them, banishing shadows to the oblivion from which they came. It was blinding. A surge of brilliance enveloped them, and just as quickly as it had descended, the shadows dissipated, unraveling like smoke caught in a breeze. Mr. Thompson's form evaporated, leaving behind only whispers, a chorus of the lost souls they had rescued. Panting and huddled together, the family found themselves drawn into the light, hearts beating as one. They were free. Tommy looked up at Natalie, wide-eyed and filled with wonder. "Did we do it?" Tears of relief streamed down her cheeks as she pulled him close. "Yes. We faced our fears together." Lily hugged her tightly, and Mark wrapped his arms around them, holding them in a fierce embrace. "You did it, Nat. You helped us survive." They stood together as the echoes faded, knowing shadows would always need watching, and sometimes, they might lurk just outside the door. But they had each other. As dawn's first light filtered in, they emerged from the darkness, reborn, knowing the power of love would always guide their way home. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Let everyone know how you felt about this conclusion. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.